Prime Minister Stephen Harper will be the first G7 leader to visit Ukraine since Russia took over Crimea. Harper will meet with the new Ukrainian Prime Minister tomorrow. The question is whether the visit is anything more than a symbolic gesture of support. I want to talk about that with James Bezan. James is a parliamentary secretary to the Minister of National Defense. He was part of the recent Canadian delegation to Kiev a few weeks ago. He's also known as a voice for Ukraine in Ottawa, and he joins me now from Winnipeg. James Bezan, what does Stephen Harper want to accomplish by being the first G7 leader to visit Ukraine?
Well, not only is it showing that Canada and Prime Minister Harper supports the transitional government that we have in Ukraine right now, but it also sends a broader message over to the Kremlin, to President Putin, that we take very seriously as a country what is happening in Crimea, what type of interference and provocative measures that are taking place along Ukraine's eastern border. And we want to make sure that Prime Minister Yatsenyuk has a chance to talk directly with Prime Minister Harper and relay his concerns and his ideas on how we move forward to de-escalate the tensions that we see in Crimea and throughout Ukraine, for that matter. Canada's
position is in lockstep with the European Union, with the United States and others who feel that the referendum is illegitimate, illegal in fact, is what the Canadian government is saying, as you well know. What more could Canada do?
Well, we're going to continue to isolate Russia if they do not de-escalate their occupation of Crimea, if they do not step back from the very aggressive and inflammatory language that they've been using, not only in relation to Crimea, but to the entire situation that we have and the way they are dealing with their world partners. They really do put themselves in a situation where they're becoming more and more isolated from Europe, from Canada and the United States and other G7 partners like Japan, and it isn't in their best interest long term, since Russia is very involved economically at the global scale. We already have 45 oligarchs and government authorities who are so directly tied into business ventures around the world that have now been targeted through economic sanctions and travel visas. So those types of sanctions will continue to be ramped up in lockstep with our allies and like-minded nations, and I really do hope that we'll start seeing a change of attitude by President Putin and the people over in the Duma.
Haven't seen one so far. What if you don't?
And if we don't, then there has been some very grave concerns already expressed by people like Angela Merkel, like Prime Minister Stephen Harper and President Obama. We will continue to speak out very strongly. We do hope that we can avoid an escalation of violence. I am very concerned about, once the formal annexation takes place with all the laws brought in place by Russia, that they don't become overly bloodthirsty in evicting Ukrainian troops that are currently stationed in Crimea. And as I just want to reiterate again, everything that's taking place in Crimea is against international law. It's against the treaties that Russia signed with Ukraine and other nations, including the Budapest Memorandum. And we have to make sure that they respect the people of Crimea, especially the ethnic Ukrainians and the Tatars, who are completely opposed to this occupation.
So it sounds to me like there's nothing really anybody can do about the annexation. This is a done deal. It's not going to reverse itself. The Russians aren't going to reverse itself. Is the Ukrainian community in Ukraine, outside of Ukraine, forced to accept that Crimea is now annexed to Russia?
I don't think anybody's going to accept that, and I actually appreciate the position brought forward by Prime Minister Yatsenyuk, and I'm sure he's going to discuss it further with Prime Minister Harper and Minister Baird and Minister McKay when they're there tomorrow, about the whole issue of making Crimea a demilitarized zone. It's a resolution that's being brought forward to the United Nations. Of course, with Russia's veto, I don't expect that to go very far, but I think that is a logical first step until we figure out how Russia and Ukraine can resolve this impasse and respect international international law and treaties. We can't just go ahead and let Russia start expanding their territory without any thought or respect to international law and how it's impacting upon their relationships with the rest of the world.
But this isn't a small community that relies on international aid. I mean, this is an energy powerhouse, and this is a big country with global resources of its own. So you can't pull those strings. I mean, if Russia's not open to it, other than military action, which everybody has made clear they don't want to go there, what can you do?
Well, economic sanctions will continue to be expanded, and it may become more than just targeted sanctions at individuals. As you said, Russia is a major player on the world scene. They are a major trader with Western Europe, and that's where there is going to be, I think, as we've heard from leaders within the European Union, that they're prepared to take a hard look if Russia doesn't step back and fully evaluate how they are affecting world relations and the stability in the region.
Very tricky, since a lot of people in Europe, a lot of countries get their oil and get their energy needs met by Russia.
And nobody more so than what we're seeing in Germany. And yet one of the strongest voices out there has been from Chancellor Merkel, and she has been very clear that she's prepared to take it to the next step if President Putin and the Russian Federation do not back down on where they're going forward with the annexation of Crimea.
All right. Well, we'll see how far this goes and what kind of announcements the Prime Minister will be making while he's on the ground there. Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defense, James Bezan, thank you for joining me from Winnipeg.
Thanks, Carol.